When Sarah Bennett lost her husband Michael in a quiet hospital room on a rainy September night, the world didn't explode or crack open, it just changed shape, like someone took all the colors out of life and replaced them with a quiet grayscale haze, and she looked down at the tiny hands of her children, Emily just 4 years old with wide brown eyes and curls that bounced like she carried sunlight in her hair, and little Jacob barely 2, still learning to pronounce mama without fumbling the sound, and she felt something rise in her chest, not strength, not courage, more like stubborn devotion wrapped in grief, a kind of love that refused to collapse no matter how heavy her heart got. And the morning after the funeral she stood in the kitchen of their modest home in Ohio, staring at a pile of bills and a breakfast table where tiny voices asked where Daddy went, and she whispered to herself, "One day at a time, sweetheart," not even sure whether she was talking to them or to herself, but she made pancakes anyway, shaped like smiley faces because even in the worst storms, children deserve sunshine, and she tied her hair up, rolled her sleeves, and went to work cleaning houses for extra income, carrying her kids whenever she had to, sometimes letting them nap on folded towels in clients' laundry rooms because babysitters cost more than she made some days, and despite aching feet, tired bones, and nights she cried into a pillow so they wouldn't hear her, she kept choosing tomorrow. She kept planting hope like seeds in dry soil because she believed one day those seeds would bloom and her kids would see something beautiful grow out of all the hard days. And as years passed, Emily learned to read sitting at the kitchen counter while Sarah packed lunches and whispered spelling words, and Jacob learned to tie his shoes while she held his tiny fingers steady, and neighbors admired how polite and bright the Bennett kids were, never knowing the quiet sacrifices behind the scenes, the late-night mending of clothes instead of buying new ones, the meals stretched with creativity and prayer, the way Sarah never let her sorrow spill into their innocence. And when they asked about their father she didn't fill their hearts with bitterness, she filled them with stories of love, stories where Michael read bedtime tales, kissed their foreheads, and laughed like life was a gift, because she wanted them to remember love, not loss. And slowly the house filled with school projects, fridge magnets, hand-drawn cards that said "You're the best mom," and laughter returned like spring thawing winter silence. And though she never remarried, never sought another partner, not because she feared love but because every ounce of her belonged to raising these children into people who knew kindness, responsibility, and faith, the days eventually softened, and Emily grew into a thoughtful teenager who helped with groceries and studies late into the evening, and Jacob became a young man who mowed lawns for extra money and hugged his mother without shame, taller than her now but always her baby in her heart, and she watched them attend school dances, ace exams, and dream about futures bigger than the small town they grew up in, and graduation day came with cap and gown pictures where Sarah clapped the loudest and cried the quietest, heart full and breaking at the same time because raising children means raising people who will one day walk away strong enough not to need you the same way anymore. And Emily left for college in Chicago, promising to call every night at first, and Jacob followed 2 years later to Texas for engineering school, and that first evening after dropping him off, Sarah sat alone in her silent living room, the house too neat, too still, and even though she was proud, unbelievably proud, she felt the weight of missing them like a second winter settling over her, because she had spent years waking them, guiding them, cooking for them, cheering for them, and suddenly her purpose shifted from constant doing to simply being, and that transition knocked the air out of her in a way that grief once had. And the first nights alone felt like stepping into a different life she didn't remember choosing, wandering through rooms that once echoed with footsteps and arguments about homework and laughter over burned cookies, now filled only with the hum of a refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood as if the house itself missed the children too. So she poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window where she once watched Emily and Jacob chase fireflies in the summer dusk, and she reminded herself that loneliness wasn't failure. It was proof she had loved deeply and raised well, and she whispered the same words she'd spoken all those years ago when her babies were small and life felt impossible, one day at a time, and morning came, and she learned the quiet routine of a woman who had already climbed the steepest mountain of her life, volunteering at the local library, helping neighborhood moms with toddlers who reminded her of her own once clingy little ones, finding small joys like gardening and church picnics and writing letters instead of texts because she found comfort in letting emotions spill through ink, and sometimes Emily called in tears over hard exams or friendships that cracked under pressure, and Jacob sent photos from Texas, proud of a bridge model he designed or nervous before a job interview, and every time, whether her voice trembled or her heart swelled with joy, she responded with the same calm steadiness she had built through years of trial, telling them she believed in them, that life tests us because we are capable, that resilience is not loud but patient, and she never once guilted them for leaving or hinted they owed her anything. Instead, she cheered for their independence like it was her greatest victory, because it was. And as time went on, they both married, Emily to a gentle man named Ryan who admired the strength in her eyes that reminded him of quiet mountains, and Jacob to a woman named Lily whose laugh sounded like wind chimes and who thanked Sarah at the wedding for raising a man who knew how to love without ego. And though tradition might have once said children return home after marriage or live close by, both of her children built lives in different cities, visiting only now and then, not because they forgot her but because life moves fast for the young, and Sarah understood, never letting sadness turn into resentment, trusting that love is not measured in presence but in sincerity and years. Later, when grandchildren arrived, tiny hands gripping her wrinkled fingers, she felt that same fierce tenderness bloom again, softer this time but just as powerful, and she baked cookies, told bedtime stories about stars guiding sailors home, and sat on living room floors building towers of blocks like she once did with her own babies, laughing when they toppled and always encouraging another try, and every evening when they left with their parents, scattering hugs and promises to visit again. She sat for a moment after the door closed, not aching but glowing, because love had continued through her, passed down in gentle ways, and one autumn afternoon, as leaves piled golden against the fence and sunlight warmed her porch, she rocked in her chair and realized something quietly profound, that motherhood was never about keeping children tied to your side but preparing them to build lives where love could flourish elsewhere, that the truest success wasn't them staying but them growing, and in that realization her heart felt full, whole, and peaceful in a way she had once feared she'd never feel again, and whenever someone in town whispered sympathy about her living alone, she smiled kindly, because she knew she wasn't alone. Not really. She carried laughter in her walls, memories in her bones, and a legacy in the lives she shaped, and although life had taken her love early and sent her children flying far, it had also given her a strength she once didn't know she had, a story stitched with grief, grit, and unbelievable tenderness, and she hoped anyone who heard it would understand that a mother's love is not defined by who stays in her home but by who carries her lessons into the world, that raising children does not end when they leave, it evolves, and sometimes the greatest proof of your success is the quiet house left behind, because emptiness is not abandonment but graduation. And if one day her children sat in their own quiet homes after sending their little ones off into life, she hoped they would feel not loneliness but pride, knowing they too had done the sacred work of loving until love grew legs and walked into the future. And as years stretched on like a long, gentle sunset, even after her children became grandparents themselves, they still spoke her name with warmth, as though love kept her sitting beside them through every holiday meal, every scraped knee wiped by a soothing hand, every bedtime prayer whispered into soft pillowcases, and sometimes when Emily walked through the quiet of her own home after her grown children left, she felt a familiar ache echo in her chest, not painful but alive, a reminder that love stretches far beyond arms and walls and time, and she would pause at the window, watching streetlights glow in the gentle dark, breathing in the stillness that once felt lonely to her mother but now felt sacred, a quiet hall of memories where her mother's voice lived like a heartbeat, and she realized this was not the end of anything, just a circle continuing, as natural as seasons turning and tides returning to shore. Because love does not end, it evolves, it travels forward, carried in the hearts of those who were raised gently, fiercely, patiently, and whenever Jacob sat with his grandchildren on his lap and they giggled while tugging his beard or asked him why he always hums when he cooks, he would smile and say he learned from the best, and in that simple sentence, his mother breathed again, as present as sunlight warming a winter window, and one warm summer evening long into the future, when his eldest granddaughter asked him what it means to live a good life, he didn't talk about success or money or achievements. He just leaned back in his chair on the porch where fireflies danced like little floating stars and said, "A good life means loving so well that your love keeps living even when you don't." And that little girl, with hair tangled from play and cheeks flushed with youth, didn't fully understand yet, but she felt the truth settle inside her anyway like seeds ready for spring, and she tucked that wisdom into her growing heart, carrying a piece of Sarah. Without even knowing her name, proof that real love leaves fingerprints on souls, not calendars or addresses. And as dusk softened into night and a breeze whispered through the trees, Jacob lifted his eyes to the sky, not searching, just grateful, knowing somewhere beyond sight, beyond endings, beyond the ordinary, his mother was smiling, proud of the life she planted, a life that grew into forests of gentle strength and kind hearts. And for the first time in his long years, he understood fully that she never raised children to stay, she raised love to go on walking long after she rested, carrying her forward in every act of kindness, every patient moment, every whispered one day at a time. And as the stars came out and the world quieted, he felt her love not like a memory but like a presence warm as summer air, steady as a heartbeat, eternal as hope. And he whispered into the evening, "We're still carrying you, Mom," knowing she heard, because love like hers does not fade, it lives on forever in every life it touched. And that was her real story, not the sorrow of losing or the ache of letting go, but the triumph of giving so deeply that even time could not take her away. Please like and subscribe my channel.